There we go. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for the second annual Startup City Miami. My name is Frank Rhoda. I'm with The Atlantic. I have a few pieces of housekeeping before we get started. I want to give a sincere thank you to all of you for coming to join us. A huge thank you to the Knight Foundation, in particular Matt Hagman, for helping us put this wonderful event together. Now, please do silence your cell phones, or at least turn them on stun or vibrate or whatever is the feature that you have, so that we don't interrupt the program. There will be plenty of Q&A sessions, so as you hear the program, please be thinking about those, and we'll be sending mics around later for you to ask your questions. There's plenty of networking opportunities later, including lunch, and then we have a reception immediately following the program at 5, so please make sure you stay for that. On social media, please do follow us. The hashtag is StartupMiami. You can also follow both Atlantic and the Knight Foundation. Atlantic is at Atlantic_live. Knight Foundation is at KnightFDN. That's KnightFDN. That's all I have. So without further ado, I want to kick it over to Richard Florida, and thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Frank. Thanks to the New World Symphony. Thanks to the Knight Foundation. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to our colleagues at Atlantic Live. This is the second edition of Startup Miami. We hope it's better than the first, and we have a spectacular day planned for you. First, before talking just quickly about that, I'd like to thank some of the people who made this possible. First, the incredible team at Atlantic Live. We all remember when this was just a dream. They made it happen. Suzanne Smalley and Frank and Lindsay Polloway, Logan Elsis, and Michelle Timmerman, who played such an incredible role in this program. This wouldn't happen without fantastic support from my good friend Howard Herring and his team at the New World Symphony, and my own teams at the Creative Class Group, Stephen Pedigo, Reham Alexander, my wife Rana, and this was a particular dream about bringing this kind of activity to Miami of my wife Rana's, and my team at the Martin Prosperity Institute in Toronto. I'll tell you in a minute, we're releasing a report on startup cities today here at this event, and those folks at the Martin Prosperity Institute made it happen. We have a fantastic day planned for everybody. We'll hear from leading entrepreneurs from around the nation and the world, and right here in Miami about what's happening at the cutting edge of startups and startup ecologies. We have Michael Jones from Google, Sam Altman from Y Combinator, Colin Ray from IDEO, Josh Linkner from Detroit and Detroit Rock Ventures, Ilan Zachary of Rap Genius, David Porter of 8Tracks, and from Miami, we have an all-star list: Andres Moreno from Open English, Manny Medina, Roger Duarte of My Cervece, Joel and Letitia Pollock of Panther Coffee, and many more. And we have fantastic moderators to guide this discussion. 3 in particular I want to note. My great colleague Steve Clemens, the incredible Steve Clemens, you will meet Steve, is here from Washington, D.C. in the Atlantic, and Alexis Madrigal, who's probably the leading, I was going to say young, but probably the leading technology writer in the world right now. And Carol Coletta, my dear friend from the Knight Foundation. Anyway, in just a couple of minutes, I wanted to tell you we're releasing this new report. It's called Startup City. It looks at this incredible change that is happening in the world of startups, venture capital activity, and innovation and entrepreneurship. And for years and years and years, in fact, my earliest research as a young, beginning junior professor, way back in the middle 1980s when I was at Ohio State, studied the then leading centers of venture capital and startup activity, the leading ecologies where innovation and entrepreneurship were happening in the United States and the world. What we found that literally every single dime in venture capital and every single important startup was occurring in an office park and an industrial center, in an off-ramp in a suburb that one urbanist dubbed a nerdistan. This urbanist said that if you wanted to build startup ecologies, the engineers and scientists and technologists and venture capitalists didn't feel comfortable in a grubby, gritty, grimy urban center, well, like downtown San Francisco or Lower Manhattan or like our own more urban neighborhoods. Venture capital and startup activity and all of these cool things only happened in the suburbs where the engineers could drive their hepped-up Porsches and Ferraris. Well, we just updated this. The report is just out. It's on the Martin Prosperity Institute website. I have a post at The Atlantic this morning at Atlantic Cities about it. And what we found is this remarkable shift, this unbelievable shift in startup activity back to the urban core. Silicon Valley is no longer the leading center of startup activity in the United States and the world. You'll hear from David Porter later and talking about his startup in downtown San Francisco in his live-work loft. That's where the action is happening. We are now seeing almost double the rate of venture investment and startup activity in the urban zones, the South of Market area, the Mission District. The areas downtown San Francisco almost double, a quarter of all venture capital investment in the United States. New York City. When I was studying venture capital 2 decades ago, New York City was a place that raised venture capital and shifted to the suburbs of Boston or the areas of Silicon Valley. Now New York City is attracting more than $3 billion a year in the areas of Lower Manhattan, stretching from Midtown South and Midtown East down through the Meatpacking District in Chelsea, through Soho, the Village, Tribeca, down to Lower Manhattan and across into Brooklyn. Walkable suburbs. The leading centers of venture capital in the suburbs are not the old Nerdistan exurbs. They're the walkable suburbs like Cambridge, Massachusetts, around MIT, attracting over $1 billion a year. Palo Alto, right across, and in the greater DC area, Bethesda, Arlington, and Alexandria. College towns like Boulder, but not just Boulder and Austin. College towns like Ann Arbor in the shadow of Detroit. Even Lawrence, Kansas, attracting large amounts of venture capital and startups on a per capita basis. And what's driving it? Well, we've interviewed lots of entrepreneurs and a lot of startup leaders. We've talked to people like Fred Wilson in New York and many others across the country. It's the demands of talent. You know, Endeavor International, thanks to the Knight Foundation, opened their first office outside of the rest of the world in the United States in Miami. There's a major new study from Endeavor and their team which shows what do entrepreneurs want, what drives the decisions of entrepreneurs, what do they look for in a city, what do they value in an ecosystem. It's talent. And increasingly, talent wants to be in vibrant, dynamic urban centers. Our report proves this. We show a high degree of correlation between rates of startup activity, rates of venture capital investment, and places that have talent, high degrees of college-educated people, an area where Miami, frankly, lags. A high proportion of workers doing knowledge work, or members of what I call the creative class, science, technology, business, professionals, finance, healthcare, but also arts, culture, media, and entertainment. And the other thing that we find, which is driving the shift of startup activity and startup ecologies back to the urban core, is a preference for diversity. We find high degrees of correlation between startup activity and venture investment and the number of foreign-born people, an area Miami and greater Miami perform well in. The percentage of people who are involved in arts, culture, entertainment, and the media, and of course, the openness of a community to the gay and lesbian population. That's not because diversity drives economic growth and startup activity. It's because an open-minded place, a diverse place, is open to new kinds of thinking, new kinds of ideas, supports, and allows people from outside, just like we're seeing here, outsiders to come into a community and quickly mobilize. That's why places that were once home to fashion industries or movie industries, arts and music scenes, were once welcoming centers for the gay and lesbian community. It's not a one-to-one association. It's that they're the kind of open-minded communities, the kind of diverse communities, the kind of talent-attracting communities that can really succeed in allowing all kinds of people, young and old, boy and girl, straight or gay, Latino, Asian, Caucasian, African American, to engage and create those resources, mobilize people around them. We don't cover Miami in the report, so we did additional research. Because when we started the report 3 years ago, Miami was off the list. Greater Miami didn't touch the top 20 centers of venture capital activity. But what we found looking at the brand new data available from Thomson Reuters, and we will be tracking this with our research team on an ongoing basis, is that just in this past year, and the Miami Herald covered this, just in this past year, Miami has really changed its game. And of course, that's a testimony to so many things that so many of you are doing here to build companies, to support companies, to be part of that startup ecology, the efforts of the Knight Foundation to support so many efforts, profit and nonprofit alike, to build that stronger startup ecology. In the past year, Greater Miami has attracted $300 million in venture capital activity. No, that's not Silicon Valley. No, that's not Lower Manhattan. But that puts Greater Miami on the register. That puts this region in 16th place nationally. We cracked the top 20. But when we looked at the data in a more fine-grained way, we captured all of South Florida. And one of the big messages I hope we can send today is that we're not just our little neighborhood in South Beach or Miami Beach. We're not just our little community in Coral Gables or Coconut Grove. We're a mega region. This mega region of South Florida has more than 15 million people, and it produces $750 billion in economic output. It's as big as Singapore or Hong Kong. And it stretches from Miami to Tampa to Orlando. When we look at that region, that's $600 billion in venture capital investment. That's more than Greater Chicago, folks. That's the equivalent of the 12th leading regional center. Well, we're still split. We still have a lot of venture capital activity going to those classic Nerdistans, and there's nothing wrong with that. We've been coming up. We still have a lot of our venture capital going to those areas, well, out in Boca Raton or Hollywood or out near the airport. But the urban shift is starting to take place here. We're starting to see that urban shift in venture capital happen right here in our hometown. We looked at by zip code. And this will be out today. It's on the Martin Prosperity Institute website. We can get you a URL. We'll be circulating some pages, and they may already be at the desk of this report, hot off the press. But it's happening in some of our own urban centers. That area around downtown, going through Brickell, and spreading out now towards Wynwood, where a lot of arts and cultural activity were, has become a hotbed of venture capital activity. One of the high points of my day here, and hopefully of yours, is we're going to have a little conversation with the mayor, Mayor Levine. Now, I don't want to give too much away, but I read his remarks where he was at the Conference of Mayors, where he said Miami Beach isn't really a center of startup activity. So me and Matt Hagman went over and we paid him a visit. And we had a great conversation, and you're going to hear all about it because it's not true. The mayor actually has a very interesting perspective and help us think about Miami not just as a place for tech entrepreneurship and kind of being a second Silicon Valley. Michael just told me backstage, you'll hear from him in a minute, he said, Miami doesn't need Silicon Valley. It can be its own thing. What we talked about is Miami as a center, not just for tech and high tech, but as lifestyle. And you're going to hear, a place. If you read the New York Times Magazine, I'm not going to say who they profiled. If you read the New York Times Magazine yesterday, they talked about all these people come to Miami to stay young. This idea that Miami can have a niche in healthcare and bio and lifestyle entrepreneurship. Well, we have a big day planned, and it's an exciting day, and I'm looking forward to all of it, and so glad that so many of you are here. But there's one person who deserves special thanks. He's the person who really created this community. He's the person who got me and Rana and the Atlantic and our teams involved in that. He's the person who said, when he took his then new job, he was going to help put Miami on the map as a center for entrepreneurship and innovation and startup, and then we got to know one another. And I think I can call him not only a colleague, but a very close and dear personal friend. I'd like to introduce my friend and the person whose brain and checkbook is really behind this, Matt Hagman of the Knight Foundation. Thanks, brother.
Love you. Well, Richard, thank you very much